All right, thanks for showing up. Today I'm going to be talking about securing the SMB for a little bit. My name is James Pierce, and within the community, I'm James 404 or 404D. You can apostrophe D that and whatever. Anyway, I do have some time for some questions and answers in this presentation, about 10 minutes worth. If for whatever reason we don't get to your question or you don't want to ask your question out loud, feel free to message me on the Spiceworks community. If you see me running around today, anywhere, event hall, other sessions, whatever, feel free to just walk up, talk to me, flag me down, whatever. I'm always happy to answer questions. My bio, I've been doing IT for 21-ish years. Got started in local city governments, moved over to an MSP, spent 10 years doing MSP work. We got anyone in here working MSP? A few people? Yeah. It's fun, isn't it? From there, I moved over to higher education and started teaching IT classes. And then most recently, about 3 years ago, started working for a small business again that does manufacturing of napkins. Work for Powersim Paper. We're located in Sparks, Nevada, which is right outside Reno. Along the way, I've collected a few certifications, because yay, certifications, right? What are we going to cover today? A few learning objectives. First of all, why is antivirus, firewall, and backups just not enough anymore? How many of you remember back in the days where if you had an AV, firewall, and a backup, you were pretty good? Yeah, a few of us, right? Then I'm going to focus most of my time actually on what else can we do? How can we add even more layers of security without breaking our budget? If you're like me, working for small businesses, you probably don't have a lot of money for a security budget, or you may not even have a security budget, which is kind of where I'm at. But we really do need to take cybersecurity seriously. Some of the other sessions that we've seen this week, SMB is becoming a bigger and bigger target. Why? We're low-hanging fruit. And what I'm going to cover is how do we stop being low-hanging fruit? How do we close off the easy stuff? And then most importantly, how do we add all these layers of security without impacting our users? How do we keep them happy? It's kind of one of our most difficult challenges, right? So learn objective 1, great story. So how many of you either offer this or have been reached out as to be sold on managed security as a service? Yeah, me too. I had a really trusted vendor call me up. I used them for something completely different, not security at all. They called me up and they're like, hey, we offer managed security as a service now. It's like, wow, that's great. I got a great relationship with my rep. It's like, yeah, why don't you come in? Let's talk. Let's see what you can do, because I've got a few things already going on, and I want to see what more could I add. And if they could provide something that I don't have, good value, maybe I'll jump on board with them. And they come in with their team, and they start talking about how they're going to replace my antivirus, replace my firewall, and replace my backup. It's like, wait, what? Aren't you going to do some network monitoring for me? Maybe, don't you have a SIEM and you can aggregate all of my logs for me because I can't afford a SIEM? No, it was antivirus, backups, and firewalls again. I'm like, come on, there's so much more we can do here. One of the reasons these 3 features, which you do need to have, I'm not saying throw this out, but what's our problem right now? Antivirus doesn't catch all. How many of you have an antivirus solution that you absolutely love that has catched everything thrown at you? Yeah, I know. Very few of us do, right? We pick, what's that called during election time? The lesser of two evils, right? You pick your antivirus on which sucks less, right? Well, at least some of us do, right? There's very few of us are really excited about our antivirus product. Like, oh my God, you got to try this. This is the best thing ever, right? We're not hearing that anymore. Firewalls, especially in the SMB, they're only as good as they're configured. A lot of people, especially in the SMB, you may not have a firewall specialist. You may have somebody that came in, installed it, kind of walked away. Or even if you installed it yourself, you may be jack of all trades like I am. I'm not a firewall specialist. I dabble in a little bit of everything. Do I know enough to configure my firewall as best as I think I could configure it? Sure. But what if I actually had a firewall specialist? I could probably get it even more configured to a better state. So there's potentially services and features I'm missing out on that are not enabled that I didn't purchase because I don't know how to configure them. Next-gen firewalls. How many of you have next-gen firewalls? Ooh, a little bit more than I thought. Another big problem with small, medium-sized businesses, we can't afford next-gen firewalls. We see the cheaper ones that are in somewhere around $1,000, $1,500, and that's good enough. Some of these next-gen firewalls can scale up into the $5,000, $6,000 range, and it's really hard to get the budget money for that. But a lot of these next-gen firewalls have some very unique services that you really should take a look at and look at how could you find that budget. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the services I'm using on a next-gen firewall in a later slide. Backups. This is one of my pet peeves, and it's a personal thing. Don't get offensive, especially if you're a backup vendor. Any backup vendors here? I do not really care for the marketing strategy of you need backups to prevent ransomware. When I wrote this up, there was no backup that prevents ransomware. But backup vendors are marketing, oh, you need this backup because, we help with ransomware. It's not a proactive approach. It doesn't help prevent. The only time you care about it is when you actually need to restore, when you got a problem, right? And what I'm looking at here is what else can we do proactively to try to prevent ransomware, viruses, phishing, all the other bad stuff on the internet, right? So you still need backups. Not saying throw your backup system out. Another big problem in SMB, our backup best practices usually aren't followed. How many SMBs have you walked into where it's like, hey, when was the last time you tested your restore? And they're like, what? Another great story I have, back in my MSP days, I went out on site to a failed server, completely dead. Both drives in the RAID 1 array were dead. It's like, great, you guys got backup? Yeah, we do. Where is it? It's in the server. So obviously you know where that story goes. There was nothing on the backup. They lost everything. Because the small business wasn't told, oh, you need to change your backups, you need to rotate them out. It was just, oh yeah, we set it up, set it and forget it. Absolutely air gap your backups if you can. Get them offline. Oh, we store to the cloud. It's offline, it's offsite. Okay, but does your administrator account have access to it at all times? It could potentially be compromised. If you can air gap them and actually have them offline, like turned off, so tape on a shelf, USB hard drive on a shelf, ransomware is not going to attack that. How many of you seen this approach in small businesses? Cut the hard line, right? Honestly, this is what this session's about. We can do a lot better than what we're currently doing. So let's talk about learning objective 2. What more can we do? Another quick story, because our goal, again, is not to break the budget. Went to another tech conference in Reno about a year and a half ago. Ran into this great security vendor. They had this really interactive thing that kind of looked like the Matrix meets the hackers, very similar to this picture. And they were showing off like how one system was infected and it was sending all these packets everywhere, and you can actually see the packets flowing between systems. I was like, wow, this is really cool. This is really exciting. I'm like super stoked. I really want this thing. And I started talking to the vendor, and it's like, okay, so how much money is it going to cost me to get your product? And they were like, oh yeah, so we start off at $4,000 a month. Anyone got that budget in a small business? Yeah, me either. I don't even know if I get paid $4,000 a month, honestly. So let's start with some very simple stuff. We all know end users are our weakest link, right? We need to get them trained. And you know what? There's users there that just don't care. How many of you have users that you've trained over and over and over again and they just don't get it? I'm right there with you. I'm in a small business. I struggle with all of this as well. There's plenty of vendors downstairs, if you haven't already talked to them, that offer phishing training, phishing campaigns, user training, security awareness for users. If you haven't talked to them, go talk to them. There's a lot of them that are really reasonable. But what if they're out of your budget? Have you thought about doing it yourself? Have you thought about grabbing existing spam like this and showing users exactly what to start looking for? It doesn't take a lot of work. This is 5 minutes of, a screenshot, add some arrows in MS Paint or Microsoft Word, whatever you want to use. If you're great with Photoshop, please go ahead, use it. I'm not good at Photoshop. But we can quickly show off how something like this is trying to phish your credentials. And you may, and again, small business here, we're not talking enterprise. You may have to literally walk up to the user, go to their desk, and walk through this with them and show them step by step by step. Obviously, if we can get something more automated, like from a vendor that we have a budget for, that would be great. Get some more reporting. But if you have to do it manually, it's okay. How many of you got older systems? All right, show of hands, who is still supporting Vista? No one? ME? 2000? NT4? NT4, yes. 98. What's your 98 box?
98 box is on a print controller.
All right. For a press. I understand. I have a die cutting machine running Windows 98. And you know how we get data to it? Third bullet, SneakerNet. Does everyone know what SneakerNet is? Raise your hand if you don't. Okay, SneakerNet, I copy things from a USB, I pull it off my computer, I use my sneakers, and plug it into the other machine. Yeah. Yeah, it's off my network. It has no internet connection. I'm really not worried about this machine being compromised. I don't care if it gets updates either. Because it is designed to do one job. Cut paper. That's it. Well, what if SneakerNet doesn't work? What if you can't update? What else can you do? The first thing I highly recommend is try to throw it on its own VLAN. That way you can limit control of what it can and can't get to. Limit control of, if it gets compromised, where can the compromised data spread to? A couple years ago in the UK, there was a healthcare system out of London that got one of the breaches. I think it was part of Internal Blue. Anyone know that story? National Health System of UK, right. And one of the biggest problems is they're still running XP for like their MRI machines. And the doctors are like, well, I want my email right from here. And I get it. Doctors get paid a lot of money and they get to basically tell us what to do. And if they're not happy with us, we get fired. But that's the type of thing we really need to try to push that user training to those doctors. Get those machines onto the VLAN. So if they do get compromised, it doesn't wipe out everything else. And in the United States, we have a compliance issue called HIPAA that we got to pay attention to. So we got to also try to get those machines segregated so that we're not breaking any compliance laws. And then as well, throwing the machine in a VM. Sometimes this helps, sometimes this doesn't. It really depends on your situation. Because obviously if your VM is tied to your machine and you're giving it, the same internet access as your machine, you're potentially not helping at all. But if you can throw it on your machine and give it no internet connection, and you can copy data back and forth between your machine and the virtual machine, then you can help isolate that machine without having to upgrade to the latest and greatest version. Because some of us, this app doesn't work on the latest version, right? Okay. Spam and phishing filters. Everyone have one? How many of you love it? All right. How many of you hate it? All right, there's a few of you. Like AV, spam and phishing filters, they're not all the same. You set up your spam filters, you set up your rules, and eventually the things that you think you were blocking all of a sudden start getting through because these composers of these emails find a way to get around your rules, right? We need them. We need to stay on top of configuring them, trying to stay on top of what is the latest and greatest and how can we block certain things. Obviously, there's a bunch of services out there. You can add it on as a service. There's a couple vendors downstairs that'll help you with that. If you have hosted email on Exchange or Microsoft like I do, there's services there as well. There's also a lot of services built into firewalls. So I do have a next-gen firewall. This is the screenshot I get when I click on a phishing email and try to go to a page that is a fake Office 365 login. I don't get the page. I get this error instead. This feature alone has probably paid for my next-gen firewall within 6 months. I've had about 5 or 6 users within the first 6 months call me up and say, hey, I got this email, I clicked on the link, and it won't load.
Your firewall won't see it.
Yes. My firewall blocked them from going to that webpage. Yeah, we're not unblocking that, okay? And this is a feature I haven't seen in a lot of firewalls, but some of the next-gen ones do have an actual credential phishing detection feature. For a lot of those firewalls, it's an add-on service, but personally, it's worth the money. At least in my environment. Your environment may be different. Web content filtering. How many of you use web content filtering? How many of you set up a policy for the entire company? How many of you have more than one policy for different groups of users? Oh, good. I'm not the only one. But this is something I've always seen in small businesses, and especially the very small business, something like 30 users or less. Well, let's just block adult entertainment websites because we don't want a lawsuit. Cool. But yet you're going to allow them to get to every other website out there, all the phishing websites, all the drive-by download websites. You allow them to click a link in an attachment in their email, which redirects to another page, which is a fake Dropbox, which goes to a fake PDF. But that's okay. We don't want adult entertainment websites to be loaded. On top of where can a user go, how many of you actually block different type of file extensions at your firewall level? Good. There's a lot of us. I mean, Office and Outlook have specifically said, hey, you can't send EXEs anymore. Anybody remember the days where we used to be able to send EXEs back and forth? Man, that was a lifesaver. But yet, a lot of us don't configure our firewalls to block users from downloading EXEs. Why are users downloading EXEs? And I'm not talking about your developers and your special power users that can, you actually trust them and they need to download EXEs. I'm talking about, your HR person, your accounting people, that really they have no business installing any software. So why even give them the ability to download anything that could potentially compromise the system or your network? Suspicious IP blocking. So the way I do this is my setup, and you can do it a few other ways. Spiceworks Network Monitor, I do use it because I'm a small business and it fits my needs. And one of the features I get is I get an email from time to time where a suspicious IP has tried to connect to my network. So I create a firewall rule, and I add that IP to the rule, and I do a deny all. Or more specifically, drop the connection. So anything coming from this IP now gets dropped. Yes, there are potential problems with this. This is not a fix-all. This is not the silver bullet of cybersecurity. It's potentially a hotel. Potentially my CEO will go to the hotel in the future and try to connect in and won't be able to. Okay, I'll fix that when that time comes. But for right now, I've detected something that doesn't look right, and I'm going to drop the connection. We have some potential issues for this. In my environment, again, small business, we're really focused on small business here. I don't host my web server internally. I have a third party hosting my web server elsewhere. I don't have my own email server. That's hosted online with Microsoft. So aside from my employees coming in via VPN for remote access, is there any reason for anyone to make a direct connection to my network? In my case, no. Your networks, that may vary. And I do understand that. So you got to be really careful if you're going to implement something like this. You could potentially block a customer from connecting to your email server or your web server, which is going to impact business, and we don't want to do that. Now, if you're not using Network Monitor or Spiceworks Network Monitor, you can be checking your own firewall logs, looking for suspicious IPs that might be trying to do a port scan against your network. There are a lot of firewalls out there that have pages and pages of logs and will show you all sorts of things that are happening. Are we reviewing these logs? How many of you are reviewing your own firewall logs? A few of you. What? How often is the next question. How many of you gave up on it because it's just pages and pages of information that you're just like, I ain't got time for this? A few of us, okay. And that's part of what I'm trying to, I'm going to get to with this slide and the next slide, is if we can reduce the noise of your firewall logs, we can actually have better information, and we can actually review them on a more frequent and a quicker basis. And part of that is go ahead and dropping connections that you know are already bad. GeoIP blocking. Okay, I know. There's some of you out here that are like, why you even mention this? This doesn't work. Yeah. Your attackers can get around GeoIP blocking very easily with a VPN or a proxy. They could pretend to come from the US, and they get right around this prevention. Cool. You're right. However, not every attacker is going to do that. A lot of the lower-end attackers that really don't know what they're doing, they're paying for the ransomware as a service, where they're just getting somebody else's code and executing and seeing, what is actually going to hit and what's open. They may not know how to go through a VPN or a proxy. So even though this is not the end-all, be-all cybersecurity best answer, it will help reduce your noise in your firewall logs so that you can make your data in your logs easily readable, something that we can do frequently. And again, what are some of our challenges? Email and web servers. If you're hosting your own stuff, you're going to potentially block potential customers from getting to your email or your web server, which will impact business. So be very careful with setting this up. Make sure you do understand how your business runs, who your customers are. In my environment, all my email and web content is hosted, and there is no reason for any of our customers to make a direct connection to my network. How many of you removed local admin rights? Wow. A lot more than I thought. Me too. How many of you can't remove admin rights because you have an application that says you can't? Yeah, me too. And then I found a workaround. This right here will cut down quite a bit of your virus and ransomware stuff. If the user doesn't have the ability to run an application that needs admin rights, it's going to prevent things from actually running. If we tie this in with application whitelisting, majority of our bad stuff, aside from the phishing stuff on the internet where you get redirected to a web page, But the stuff that actually comes down to your network that you're downloading is running in the background, you don't even notice it, most of this won't even run anymore. I had a user double-click some attachment in an email, and this notified me before my antivirus did that it was denied and blocked access. So if you are interested in application whitelisting, there are some vendors that will do application whitelisting like right in their programs, like I can't remember the vendor name off the top of my head, but there is a couple of next-gen AV vendors that do application whitelisting. However, if you can't afford that, Spice had Brian Doe, who I don't think is here at Spice World this year. He has a great how-to article right in SpiceWorks community. This is the link I used. You can set this up, test it, and have it fully functional in your spare time in about 2 weeks. It really doesn't take a lot of effort to put together. And the error message up here is when somebody tries to launch a file that is not whitelisted, they get told, you've been blocked. This and removing admin rights alone has probably reduced the different attacks in my environment by 60%. And that's just a guess. I don't have hard numbers. But this has been huge in securing my network. Patch management. How many of you have a patch management solution? Manual? Manual is a solution. Why not? You're doing something. You're staying on top of it, right? Yes, plenty of vendors downstairs that will tell you all about their patch management solutions. There's some really good ones that have some reasonable cost. But again, what if we don't have the budget? At least we could get WSUS going. Because what's the percentage we think of our vulnerabilities are actually Windows-based? 80, 90%? I mean, when was the last time we were really, really concerned that Chrome wasn't updated? This morning? Ooh, awesome. Right. Absolutely. And yes, you can run around and do things manually. A lot of programs, a lot of our software nowadays do have an automatic update feature. Adobe is notorious for having automatic updates. It likes to pop up at you. Java, which is going away, likes to pop up. We all remember those pop-ups, right? It's like a Jack Russell Terrier. VLANs. I already mentioned VLANs. I want to mention it again. A lot of small businesses is like, well, you know, even with all this stuff, we only got like 50, 60 devices. We don't need a VLAN. But think about everything that could be compromised. Again, out-of-date machines, we've already talked about that. IoT devices are becoming more and more popular. How many of you are adding IoT into your networks now? Yeah, thermostats, HVAC stuff. Anybody got any fun IoT things? Nothing fun? All right. Cameras. How many of you got IP cameras? I have 65 computers I manage. I have 96 cameras. We're a 400,000 square foot facility in manufacturing. We have a lot of safety issues, people putting fingers where they really shouldn't. So majority of our cameras are pointed at like safety guards, and just to make sure people aren't, you know, chopping fingers off on accident. Kiosks. Anyone got a kiosk for anything? Yeah? Yeah, we got a couple. HR wanted them so that some of our employees could check like their paychecks and health benefits and stuff. Digital signage. Yeah, we're looking at digital signage as well. Specialized machines. I heard somebody else out there had a printer or something. Yeah. I've got 50 shop machines that have no business on the internet but need a VPN connection, so the vendor of the machine, some of which are across the country, some of which are on the other side of the pond, can remote in and calibrate. Other than that, they have no business being on the internet. But and of course, compliance is another issue. How many of you take credit cards for something? You got to follow PCI compliance. Some of you might be in medical and deal with HIPAA, right? All of these different devices are a target of attack. We know IP cameras can be hacked. We know that could be a jumping point to get to the rest of the network. So why are you leaving it on your primary LAN? Why are you not segmenting it off? Is there a valid reason? If you haven't looked into VLANing these off to isolate them in the event that they get compromised, I mean, I have 96 cameras. That's a lot. If they get compromised, yeah, that's a lot to rebuild. But it's still less than rebuilding my entire network. DNS filtering. We all using DNS filtering? Yeah, some of us were. So, a bunch of vendors downstairs, again, that offer DNS filtering. OpenDNS used to be free, right? Then Cisco bought them, and it's not free anymore. Kind of, yeah. So Cisco Umbrella is one of, does some DNS filtering pretty good. Are you aware that Quad9 and Cloudflare have DNS filtering for free? All you got to do is point your firewall to their servers. Free DNS filtering for you. I'm sorry?
I didn't think the Cloudflare offered filtering. I thought it was just fast.
I'm pretty sure it's filtering now too. If I'm wrong, I may be wrong. I built this slide deck 4 months ago, and I've been on Cloudflare for about a year, with Quad9 being my first entry. Cloudflare is my secondary. So, I mean, if you're not using DNS filtering, and if you don't even know what DNS filtering is, it's this simple. If the website is known to be malicious, these DNS servers should not allow you to get there. So it's another web filtering, content filtering feature. So if you can't do it on your firewall, you can't do it anywhere else in your network, you could look at doing it on DNS filtering. But why not do it everywhere if you have the ability to without spending a whole lot of money? File Server Resource Manager. Anyone use this? A few of you. Cool. I may need to pick your brains because I tried to get this going and I got it partially working and then I thought I had it and then I had to rebuild it and I had some trouble. But I love this idea. And again, this is not any of these single solutions are the silver bullet to completely protecting your network. But if you add as many of these as you can, you're going to have a much better protected network on a really low budget. So with File Server Resource Manager, assuming you have Active Directory, assuming you have a Windows server, you can set this up for free. There's no cost to this. It's not an additional charge at all. What this does is basically the crypto canary. For those of you not sure what crypto canary is, are you familiar with the concept of a canary in a coal mine? Yeah. Okay. So what this is doing is looking for a set of files, basically a honeypot that you set up, that start changing, specifically changing with extensions that are known cryptovirus extensions. And if it finds one, it triggers. Okay, cool, it triggers. But what does it do when it triggers? That's up to you. When I was doing my testing, all I wanted to do was send me an email to alert me. But you could do so much more with this. You can actually trigger the server to shut down. You can turn off services like SMB. You can kill network cards from being active. You can disable them. So if something gets triggered on the server, you can shut it down immediately and potentially stop the spread from happening. How many of you audit yourself? Yay, a few of us. How many of you don't have time to audit yourself? Yeah, that's always the big one, right? If you can find the time, which hopefully adding some more of the security will slow down the issues that you're having and hopefully give you some more time to start auditing and checking logs. Learn how to check your firewall logs specifically for that traffic. What's coming in? Why is it coming in? What about your router and switch configs? How many of you are so busy that you have to make a change like, oh, I need to move this port on this switch to VLAN 7. And you go in and you make the change and then you forget to document it. And then sometime down the road, you go and you're going to make some sort of change and you're like, oh, I should be able to take this port and move it to VLAN 6. And you go in and it's on VLAN 7. You're like, what? What happened? Oops, forgot to document this. How many of you are really good with documentation? I love documentation. I don't know why. I guess I'm just sick in the head. But I do love documentation. I love writing up the documentation and having a network binder. I have a binder about this thick printed out of my entire configuration. So like when I'm here today, I hand it over to my CFO and say, if anything really bad happens, call another company and give them this. How many of you are familiar with Nmap? Cool. Nmap is a free tool. It's part of the Kali Linux distribution. It's a command line. There's like 5 switches you need to really care about. The stealth switch, don't run on a production network. Do not run it on production network. Your users are going to be very unhappy. But get yourself a copy of Kali, start learning and understanding Nmap, and run Nmap against your own network. You're going to see what is open, what ports are open, what is available, what is the banner. When you hit a Windows server, you are going to see exactly what version of that server is being reported right back to Nmap. This is going to help you understand what is out there, what are those entry points that attackers could use, and what could we do to potentially close things down and make things a little bit more secure. I'm not a security pro. I know security, but I don't consider myself a pro. That's not my life. My life is small business and jack of all trades. But if I can use Nmap just a little bit to make my network a little bit more secure and get rid of that low-hanging fruit, ideally I'm not going to have a breach and have to recover. Searching Active Directory. How many of you have got old users, somebody quit, someone got fired, you reset their password, but you didn't necessarily disable their account because you got a forward email, then you forgot about them. Yeah, I found a user that was like 3 years old the other day. My bad. But you know what? This type of stuff happens. So take the time to go through Active Directory and look for old users that you may have forgot should have been disabled or deleted. Any other services you have that might have user accounts, like maybe your ERP has a separate user database. Mine does. Everyone know how to check Windows Server logs? Yeah. How many of us do it? Yeah. Honestly, I'm in the same boat because I find the least amount of good information in Windows Server logs when it comes to cybersecurity. I mean, it's nice to know like disk usage is like up here. That's great. But I'm not finding anything from a cybersecurity standpoint that I'm really super excited about. I do try to check my logs as much as I can, about once every 2 weeks. Like to do it weekly, but hey, we don't have time, right? Spiceworks inventory. Yes, I use all the Spiceworks tools. It fits my environment, and I know Spiceworks tools, your environments can outgrow really quick. I use it because I do like this one feature. I get an email every Monday morning telling me what's new on my network. It shows me any new computers or any new devices that have been added, as well as new software. So I can see what's updating. So if somebody calls me and says, hey, Chrome's acting funny, if there's an update, there's a good chance that's my problem. I have one computer that keeps popping up and keeps going away. Finally tracked it down. But without this email, I would have never known that I had a user bringing in their home laptop. And sure, could I have implemented like MAC filtering on my switches or MAC filtering on the access point? Yeah, but I got too many auditors and other vendors coming in to where that's not feasible for my environment. Some other considerations. How many of you still have RDP open right to the internet? Woo, yeah. So funny story, and why have I implemented so much of this at my environment? When I got hired 3 some odd years ago, on day 6, it was a Monday. It was the second Monday of my new job. And I walk in, and half of our H drive is encrypted. Half. And there's no ransom note anywhere. Like, okay, that's kind of weird. What happened? So I started doing some investigation, and I find that some ransomware had executed somewhere on the network. And it started about 4 a.m., and somewhere around 6 a.m. it just stopped. Just magically stopped. I still can't figure out why it stopped. I'm assuming it was really bad code. Encrypted about half of our H drive, which is our user drive. And I found it originated from a remote desktop server. All right. Problem was, this was day 6. I didn't know we had a remote desktop server. I hadn't found it yet. So I do some investigation, and sure enough, it's wide open to the internet. We all know that's bad. I find out that every user in Active Directory is part of the remote user or remote desktop user group, including the temp account called inventory that we use once a year when we do physical inventory. I'll give you a hint. It starts with inventory. Yeah, the inventory user account had a password of inventory. It was a temp account. The CFO thought it would be easy. Why it has remote desktop access, I'll never know. So obviously we closed up remote desktop. We removed inventory from having access to the remote desktop user group. So it can't log into remote desktop anymore. Since then, we've actually deleted the account. I mean, obviously we changed the password immediately. But it was crazy. I was like, this is like security 101, like especially from the password point of view. Having the username and the password the same is just, we've known this since what, 94? Maybe 95? All right. Speaking of passwords, account policies. How many of you got password policies and account lockout policies? Great. For those of you that don't, you can set it up right on a Windows server. You don't need to spend a lot of money on a manager for this. Two-factor authentication. How many of you moved over? I haven't, sorry. I want to, specifically for Exchange Online. Most of the stuff internally, we probably don't need it. It'd be nice to have, but I don't want to spend a lot of money on it right now. Talked about backup best practices. 3-2-1 rule, everyone know what that is? Yeah. 3 copies of your data, 2 different types of media, 1 off-site, right? Talked about error gap, talked about testing. For those of you that need a cheap backup solution or another layer of backup solution, if you've never used Robocopy, take a quick look at it. I've thrown a script up that I use quite a bit. And this is what I call the poor man's backup. It's not going to get system state. It's not going to get Active Directory. It's just going to get your data, which is what a lot of that ransomware wants to block from you. Because we can spin up Windows servers relatively easy. If you've ever spun up a Windows server, you can do it again. It's not that hard. An hour maybe, depending on your hardware? But as IT professionals, can we rebuild manually user data? How many of you have your sales team has this giant spreadsheet with all of your part numbers and all the prices. Can anyone rebuild that from memory? Probably not. I mean, the company I work for, we have 10,000 products, over 10,000 products. I couldn't tell you one part number because they're all like 12 digits long. It's not 11 zeros and 1 for the first one. I know that. They all start with like 806 something. So as another layer for certain specific things, this particular script, the example I have up here, this is a quarterly backup I throw on a USB drive and I take home. I have a 2 terabyte external USB drive. I make a copy of the H drive, my user data. I just run this over a weekend, let it sit at my desk. I go home for the weekend. I come in Monday. I unplug it. I take it home. I do it once a quarter. Worst case scenario, if I can't use my other backups, I can't bring back everything, at least I have this user data. The fun objective. How do we keep users happy? This is probably the one you're really interested in if you haven't taken admin rights away because you have a piece of software that says you can't. I've ran into this multiple times. At my current company, I walked in and everyone had admin rights because our ERP software must have admin rights. We've been told by consultants, we've been told directly by the vendor, we've been told by everyone. Took me about 2 weeks, and I discovered what all this software needs is the user to have read-write permission to 5 folders within program files x86. That's it. No registry changes, nothing else. So after I install our ERP, I have a little batch file that changes the permissions of those 5 folders. And now no one needs admin rights. Most of the stuff your software needs admin rights for is either a folder, a file, or a registry entry. But how do we determine which and what needs to change? There are some free tools to help us out. First, from sysinternals, Process Monitor. It's like Task Manager. It's real time. As you're running applications, it's showing you what that application is trying to access. You can also use LUA Bug Light, which is another free tool from Microsoft. It is a logger. So think same concept as Process Monitor, but as you do stuff, it'll log it for you so you can review the logs later. And it'll show you everything that application was trying to access. Another tool from Microsoft is the Microsoft Application Toolkit. Once you discover and what you need access to, you can use the toolkit to create an application shim so that you can make that program run with the proper permissions. The second bullet here, the temporary admin rights during install. This is an old trick, but it still checks out. Years ago, back in the 90s, dinosaurs were walking the earth. All these CEOs, CFOs had these great devices called Palm Pilots. Yeah. And if you were running on Windows NT 4.0 like I was back in the day, NT 4.0 didn't support USB. So you had to connect them via serial port. It's great. And Hotseek Manager, which is what Palm Pilot used, the install, I don't want to call it bad programming because really the Palm Pilot was a really good device and the software worked pretty well. But when you installed Hotseek Manager, it only installed if you had admin rights, and it only installed to the user profile you were logged into. So if you logged on as yourself, as an admin, and installed it, and then logged out and had the user log in, Hotseek Manager wouldn't even work. It wasn't even there. No icons, nothing. So the user had to be an admin, and you had to install as the user, which was just another inconvenient thing because now the user needed to hang around to type their password in, right? And we ran into all sorts of trouble with this and trying to get this to work. And I don't even remember who told me this, but I finally got I was talking to someone, and they told me the trick. Make the user a local admin, log on as the user, install the software, do an initial hot sync to get data going, and then pull their admin rights away. And if you did this, the install changed all the registry file folder permissions so that the user had the rights, but you didn't need admin rights afterwards. This trick still works for some software today. So if nothing else is working for you, try giving the user or a test user admin rights, do the install, make sure it works, and pull it off, and then see if it continues to work. And then, of course, I know no one likes to use it, the run as command. I do have one piece of software where I do have run as in the shortcut on the desktop. The users are in my shipping department. They drive forklifts. They're not really good with computers. I'm not worried about them trying to reverse engineer and get passwords out of that. Your mileage may vary. All right. How do we keep our users happy? Obviously, this starts at the top. We need to talk to our C-level people. We need to get their buy-in. Make sure you use reputation and cost when you're talking to them. Do not talk about VPNs and VLANs. They don't care. Talk about Home Depot and Target that were breached. How many of you started going to Lowe's instead of a Home Depot? Yeah, me too. For a lot of small businesses, if that information that there was a breach got out to the public and people started going away, there may be enough damage to where your small business may go out of business, right? And that's what we need to talk about. We need to find out from the C-level people, how much does an hour of downtime cost? If the network doesn't work for 1 hour, is it $1,000 that we lose? Is it $5,000 we lose? Is it $100? I mean, how much is it? And then understand how long is it going to take for you to restore and fix things. Because if it's going to take you, let's just say 8 hours of production time, and the C-level suite says, well, if we're down, it's $10,000 an hour. Well, $10,000 times 8 hours, that's 80 grand you now have a budget for. If you could convince your C-suite, hey, let's take some of this money and invest so that we can bring our downtime down, and instead of me saying, well, yeah, it's going to take 8 hours to restore, maybe it'll only take 2 hours, maybe it'll take 4 hours. That's where you find your budget. We need to continue pushing our users, hey, good passwords. Tell them it's because of compliance issues. Make sure they understand why. Try to get them to care about this. I know they don't. I know. It's tough. I'm right there with you. I got users that they want their password as password. If they could have a blank password, they would. Take things slow. Absolutely take things slow. We want to make this as seamless as possible. We don't want to impact our users. Especially with removing admin rights or adding application whitelisting. If you can, have a separate server and one machine. Do a test network. Build it slowly here. Most importantly, if you want this to work right, apply all of this to yourself. Because if you can't do your job, you're going to fix this faster for yourself than you're going to fix it for a user. If you can remove admin rights on yourself, add application whitelisting, add DNS filtering, add all of this, everything else that we've talked about today, to yourself and still do your job, shouldn't your users still be able to do their job? So play in the same sandbox with them. Everything you want to apply to them, apply to yourself first. And for those of you that are working in teams, I've had this conversation with plenty of users. User calls me up, printer doesn't work. I click print and it doesn't do anything. I'll be like, okay, let me test. Works fine on my machine. Yeah. How many of you have said that before, right? Yeah, users don't like that. So we get over that attitude of, it works on my PC. And obviously, we're going to fix our problems first. We got a microphone here, so if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. Get stuff rolled around.
Talking about the local admin rights, a company you definitely need to check out is CyberArk. They have an endpoint manager, and it basically takes the local admin from the user, and you apply it to executables or folders, and you create rules. They have it software as a service, or you can install it on premise through group policy.
That sounds great.
But they have they have an app whitelisting part of that. But man, it makes it so nice when you've got some application that needs it, and it just runs is elevated, as that process, not the user.
That sounds great.
And I mean, for the software as a service, I think even at a very low count, it's only like $25 a year. So definitely, it'll doing all these kind of things that you got to document and remember what you did. When something updates, that takes care of it.
Great suggestion. It sounds like it could be very budget friendly for a lot of companies too. Thank you.
What's it called?
It's CyberArk. It used to be Infinity, but it's cyberark.com. They do a lot of password management for enterprise, and this is not an enterprise type of software, but it's the EPM, the endpoint manager.
Thank you.
What about least privilege for your administrators on your team? What I mean is you don't want people with domain admin privileges logging onto a compromised desktop to do the remediation. So, like, I have desktop administrators that have only administrative permission to workstations.
That's great. That's another great suggestion. A lot of us in small business, our daily driver account is an admin account, right? I know some of you are shaking your head yes, some are shaking no. For those of you that your daily driver is an admin account, you really should look into creating a separate account that has lower access and only elevate when you actually need it.
I just wanted to share, thank you for all this is great. For the phishing links, the bet sites and all that, we use Trend Micro worry-free, and when the hacker creates a new web link or a new bad server, we get a newly added domain, whether it's good or it's bad. So that's good. So as hackers are creating bad websites, it doesn't let you. So this is good. You still have to go whitelist it yourself after you test it, but when all this was happening, we were just getting a lot of newly added domain, and then you have like a laptop or an error card, and you go test it, and if it's good, then you go unblock it. So this worked out very well for us, and it's also about $25 a year per user, and it's also software as a service. So
That's great.
It worked out great, so I just wanted to share it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's one of the things here is that there's a lot of different solutions. What I'm doing is not necessarily the right answer for you. And you might have other suggestions as well. Like I said, I don't have all the answers.
Hi, my name is Michael. Can you talk about other options than RDP? You had Hyper-V up there. There's a couple. Can you talk about a couple more other?
Users love RDP. Am I correct?
Yes.
Without taking RDP away, the easiest thing would be to add a VPN, so you're securing that traffic, that RDP traffic, through a VPN. So that you still get RDP for the users, it's still friendly for them. It's a few extra clicks to turn the VPN on and off for them, and just train them on how to do that.
What about another option?
Gateway.
We could talk afterwards. I've got some vendor-specific things, but this is vendor agnostic. I'm not promoting any vendors here.
Totally understand. Thank you.
We were talking over here. How many people are using the new NIST guidelines where you have a longer, more secure password, but not make them cycle it?
We got a few hands up. Yes, I'm honestly trying to push that out as well. Any new user that gets created, I'm starting with like 4 random words. And just, here's your password, and trying to explain to them the new standard is to create it as long as possible.
And one more free tool for managing local computer administrator accounts is the Microsoft Laps.
Yes.
It was super simple to deploy.
Yes, Laps is great as well.
Yeah, LAPS, Local Administrator Password Solution. It generates a new or a unique administrator password for each computer and stores it in AD, so you can go look it up.
Yes.
We need a demo next year of that.
It is.
Hey, so I'm also pretty new to this. I like the idea of the planning, the sandbox that you have for your users. So I guess correct me if I'm wrong, but if we're a G Suite organization, K-12 that I work for, and usually as an administrator, I have all the permissions plus anyone that's lower. So if I end up, how do I do playing in the same sandbox without taking down my permissions? I mean, does that mean I need to look at having like a separate account?
Yes.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah. Create just a standard user account as your daily driver and only log in as that with the administrator account as you need it. Yes? Thank you for your time. Oh, one more? One more question, real quick.
I was just wondering if you knew of any way to GeoIP filter once you've moved to Azure.
So the question was, how do you GeoIP filter once you move up to Azure? I know in some situations with Azure in a cloud environment, if you have control of your own firewall there, like if you have like a firewall VM in that stack, and you have control of that, you could implement the GeoIP there at that firewall.